Welcome to Polaris-Live, conversations on the U.S.-China relationship and its global impact as seen through the eyes of experts from around the world. This user-supported channel brought to you live in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association of New York. Viewers may ask questions using the bar on the right-hand side of the screen. The upcoming United States presidential elections are being called the most important signal for the future direction of U.S. domestic and foreign policy in generations. Throughout this autumn, we will invite a select group of international experts to offer their views on the American elections and how countries around the world, especially China, are preparing for their outcome. This is your host, Sarwar Kashmeri, and my guest today is Ms. Zongyuan Zoe Liu. Zongyuan Zoe Liu is Maurice R. Greenberg Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Her work focuses on international political economy, including global financial markets, sovereign wealth funds, supply chains of critical minerals. Her regional expertise is East Asia, specifically China, Japan, and the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Welcome to Polaris-Live, Ms. Liu. Real honor to have you.
Thank you very much, Sarwar, for having me. It's truly a great honor and a pleasure.
Listen, China's stock market today posted their best day since the 2008 global financial crisis, Zoe. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a collective gnashing of teeth for China's economic prospects. What happened?
I think, yes, the stock market, not just Shanghai, but also Hang Seng Index, they both posted a tremendous amount of return last week and today, as the country is moving into the Golden Week, celebrating China's National Day. I would say that the market rally or market reaction is a direct result to or direct response to the PBOC's or the People's Bank of China's recent stimulus policies. And if you read Reuters or some other major news outlet, people call this as not only unprecedented, but a bazooka that may signal a new era of a massive stimulus. And I would also say that this is, yes, indeed, a massive stimulus, at least since the end of zero COVID policy.
So do you think, Zoe, that this wave of optimism will continue, feed into China's troubled real estate market, for example?
I mean, Sarwar, you are right to use the word optimism in the sense that I would only put a footnote with regard to is the market rally and optimism to China's economic growth trajectory, or is more about an optimism with regard to the much needed stimulus, or is an optimism of a change in the official mindset with regard to how they manage China's economic growth slowdown and perhaps structural problems. And personally, I'm not particularly optimistic in terms of the change in mentality, and I still think that more needs to be done, especially on the fiscal side, with regard to, in particular, supporting household.
So I'm curious, President Xi Jinping, at least that's what we all thought, had a real dislike for pumping money into the economy. Do you think that what we are seeing now, this uptick, means that he's tempered that dislike a bit? What do you think?
I wish I would have the opportunity to interview President Xi Jinping in person, but unfortunately so far, I haven't get the chance or the opportunity. If you read the Wall Street Journal, you realize that, indeed there are people making the argument saying that President Xi Jinping doesn't like the idea of massive stimulus, pumping money into the economy, more specifically support direct cash injection, because that is laziness and things like that. I'm not exactly sure, and I'm not actually convinced that this is the reason the policy stimulate is signals a change of mindset at President Xi Jinping's level, because a lot of these monetary changes, these are technical policy changes without a strategic change in terms of a de-emphasize on over securitizing the economy, if you will.
Where I was going with this is, I was going to ask you next whether China's economic policy management style now is becoming more American. I'm going to ask you that anyway, but also a second related question, Zoe, which is that is Xi Jinping, in your opinion, the sole determiner of where the policy goes? Or is it a little bit like the American system where, there are groups of people that talk this through and then the president announces it? I realize this is a blue sky question, but help us feel this out.
I'll start with the first part of your question, Sarwar, in terms of is the Chinese system more like Americans? I would say that there has been a change in the sense that, especially in terms of state-market relationship, because the way you posed the question really touched the core of how state and market interact with each other in the two different systems, right? And I would say for a long period of time, since the reform and open up since 1978, at least Chinese leaders and members of the Communist Party wanted to establish market mechanism in China. And even President Xi Jinping today, he also talked about the use of market in resource allocation and so on and so forth. However, I would say that the system that the reform and open up has established is specifically to support state-led investment and export growth-led economic growth model. From that point of view, it's different from the U.S. And in terms of economic decision making, I think Professor Yasheng Huang, he wrote extensively, in particular in his recent book on the East, the rise and fall of East, right? He talked a lot, and I get the chance to talk to him, and he identified that, in fact, with the from Deng Xiaoping to now, there is a demise of check and balances within the Communist Party's top level decision making. In other words, decision has been more and more centralized, and in particular with President Xi Jinping or General Secretary Chairman Xi Jinping's centralization of power. But with regard to how much he pays attention to the details and nitty-gritties of economic policies, I'm not exactly sure, because he sits on so many different committees within the party. I doubt that he would have a lot of time devoted to economic policies.
You have a way of expressing phrases which are very intriguing. And specifically, I'll give you an example. You say that in the West, money influences politics, but in China, it is the opposite. Politics influences money. Tell us what you mean by that and why you say it.
I guess that's more speaks to the nature that I'm the product of golden era of U.S.-China relationship, if you will. I was curious about how the U.S. system work and how the two systems are different. And ultimately, I realized that, especially, and I'll give you an example, Sarwar. This year is the election year, and as this morning, I was just reading this headline saying that Kamala Harris' campaign is outspending Donald Trump's campaign. So from that point of view, that's just one example how money influences politics in the West, whereas in China, given that the Communist Party of China sits at the center of resource allocation, credit allocation, how the connection and the distance to the political power influences, and in many cases would dictate what kind of favorable terms that a business could get. So this is what I mean in terms of in the West, politics in the West, money influences politics, but in China, it's the other way around. It's politics influence money.
Well, I commend you for bringing some light-heartedness and laughter to staid economic diatribe. So I see some questions coming from viewers, and let me see if I can make sense of this. The first one, both are by the same person, and they're intriguing. The first one says US-China, in parentheses, balance sheet recession begun. I'm not certain I fully understand that. Perhaps the viewer can redo that, but I'll read his second one. US Happiness Index, debt, $36 trillion, extreme poverty, print dollar, extreme corruption. I mean, if I add those two together, it looks like a little bit of a hit on the American side of the US-China relation. You make anything out of these questions?
On the debt side, I do think that the U.S. Debt worries me the same as the Chinese debt worries me. And right now, I would say we do see the Chinese government taking actions to address that problem. But in the United States, it seems that we are still on a spending spree. And if you look at the proposals by the two presidential candidates, it seems that both are going to expand U.S. government debt, and perhaps if we continue industrial policies, the demand for government support, and in particular, perhaps a debt expansion in the United States is going to continue. But the thing here is that we used to think that there is this global savings glut that can basically buy up U.S. government debt.
Right.
But global savings rate has not grown as fast as the debt grown up. So from that point of view, I am a little bit worried about U.S. debt buildup.
I must ask you this question because it deals with the US dollar, the almighty US dollar. I mean, the point is often made that America can do this because the dollar is the currency of the world. And if I'm not in error here, people also say that no matter how much debt we float, people will buy it because it is the dollar. It is the world's currency. A comment on that, Zoe?
I would say this touch upon a very important issue in terms of the dominance currency, both in terms of international finance, trade settlement, or the SDR basket, or central bank reserves. But it also speaks to the nature of the sanction power of the United States, or broadly speaking, the coercive power or the coercive tools of economic statecraft, right? And but ultimately, I do see that I don't see any alternative or significant challengers to the U.S. dominant currency, the U.S. dollar's dominant currency position. But I do see the rise of the renminbi-denominated alternative international financial infrastructure that has been developing since 2015, because 2015 was the time when China launched the CIPS system, or the so-called CIPS, like the cross-border interbank payment system. It's a combination of messaging and a settlement system. And the data showed that as of last March, that was the first time when for China, China's international trade settlement used more renminbi than US dollar for the first time. So, but we can debate, to what extent it is driven primarily because of China-Russia trade and because of Russia was under sanctions or has been under sanctions. But the point here is that given the combination of the cost of current exchange rate, and
Right.
given the geopolitical uncertainties and sanctions, the rise of alternative non-dollar system to hedge against sanctions and reduce strategic vulnerabilities, this kind of non-dollar based payment system is here and is not going to go away.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm going to take a moment to remind viewers that Polaris Live is entirely viewer supported. We'd appreciate your signing up to our mailing list at kashmeri.com, that's KASHMERI.com, and to our YouTube channel, which is www.polaris-live.com. There's no cost to you for doing this, and it really does help us. I'm going to do one more viewer question, Zoe. For some reason, you're attracting a lot of questions. And this one has to do with something that you and I have talked about in the past, and it's kind of a headline issue. The current strategy, this question says, of U.S. seems to be to stop/contain China's economic tech progress, which directly impacts on average Chinese person. In terms of politics, does it lead to heightened animosity versus the U.S.?
I think this is an extremely important question, and it touches upon something that I personally care a lot. And thank you very much for asking this question, because oftentimes people talk about the geopolitics without talking about people. So thank you for the question. I do think that viewing from Beijing's point of view, despite that the Biden administration have talked a lot about, the small yard hyphens is not, or export controls, none of this aims to contain China. But if you view this from Beijing's point of view, and Chinese officials and scholars have also been quite outspoken about this, they view this as containment, this translate at country industrial policy level. A lot of these funnel into this so-called self-sufficiency. And then on the other hand, if you are a Chinese entrepreneur, you start to worry, should I continue buy Western technology or IPs, because I'm afraid that one day I'm going to be cut off. And then on the other hand, if you just talk to Chinese college graduate, they wanted to go into STEMs, and the government want them to go into STEM system. But it used to be the case that they go to STEM, the brightest Chinese student, they go to science, engineering, the STEM program with the hope or with the goal that they can go to America to get advanced degree, get advanced training. But that trend has people are questioning that. People are questioning that, okay, so if I get into this program, given America's policy, especially on some of those the visa policies, they started to question, should I continue thinking that America universities are my options? So from that point of view, I do think that the damage at people-to-people level, although it is unintentional, but I'm afraid the spillover effect is going to happen, and perhaps is going to be more toxic in the long run.
Well, let's hope that once our election, the American election, is over, that people will focus on this a little more. We'll continue to devote some time to this, Zoe. I want to ask you now about this phrase that is being increasingly used, the overcapacity, that China's industrial base produces more than it can handle. I mean, you've pointed out in your recent Foreign Affairs article, I should say your recent terrific Foreign Affairs article, that China's photovoltaic PV production capacity, already double the global demand, is expected to grow another 50% in 2025. This doesn't appear to be good industrial policy for China, or indeed the world, as shown by recent anti-dumping actions, even in countries such as Vietnam and Brazil. So why does China continue to follow this path, you think, Zoe?
I think there are, first of all, Sarwar, thank you for taking the time to read my recent Foreign Affairs article. The bottom line here with regard to overcapacity, first of all, is that if you talk with Chinese officials, they would not say that China has overcapacity problem. And the reason that they say China doesn't have overcapacity problem is that they cite global market as the reference point, saying that a global market is so big that China is simply there is insufficient supply rather than overcapacity. And secondly, they also cite the example in terms of industrial upgrading and the energy transition. We are right at the beginning of energy transition, so the demand is going to come. Therefore, they view China doesn't really have an overcapacity problem. But I think we cannot, from a global point of view, we cannot view overcapacity simply as supply demand. And on top of that, it's really about a trade issue, it's about geopolitics, it's about supply chain. And for individual countries, it's also about jobs, and it's also about to what extent they can have their own share in the future of global economy, right? So the reason to answer the part of your question with regard to why China is not sort of giving up this insufficient way of industrial policy, I would say that first of all, the system, again, a point I mentioned earlier, the system was built to support export growth and led economic model. And for solar industry in particular, when China started to build the industry, they were built to export. They realized that I think many years ago, when Germany passed a legislation saying that Germany is going to, in the German economy in particular, they wanted to bring in more solar in the entire energy supply system. That was the moment that triggered China's industrial investment in the solar industry. So from that point of view, if your industry is built for export purposes, then it is hard to change. But then obviously in the whole process, you have central government giving incentives, you have local government across the entire country trying to invest in the same industry for political, demonstrating that you are moving along with the central government policy, but then on the other hand, also trying to get preferential financing. So you end up having a lot of duplicative investment. And then of course, at a firm level, as long as your project is aligned with government policies, it is relatively easier to get approval, get subsidies in form of preferential use of land, and so on and so forth. So I would say this is a systematic problem that cannot be easily addressed, even if the government is willing to change it.
I have to mention something that I just glanced at before we came on the air, Zoe, and that is a new photovoltaic PV development in China, where apparently solar power can be used to recharge and keep these batteries going forever, they say. I haven't read this. It sounds a little bit science fiction, but China is known to do some science fiction now and then. But I want to go to another topic and use your expertise to see what you think of it. China saw the world's biggest outflow of high net worth individuals last year, and is expected to see a record exodus of over 15,000 in 2024. Now, the U.S., China's arch rival, is their top destination. Is this weird or what? What's happening here?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm familiar with the data suggesting, or the data showing, that China's massive exodus of high net worth individuals, and I think even data for the first 2 quarters of this year also suggests that China suffered in terms of exodus of high net worth individuals. China was number 1. I'm not exactly sure they are coming to the U.S., although I'm pretty sure that they would love to come to the U.S. I think the exodus is, there are different ways that we can think about it, and obviously depending upon who you talk to, many people would cite the common prosperity drive and the anti-corruption movement. But then I guess the deeper concern, or more speaking more to the structural issues there would be to what extent the Chinese system protect individual wealth and individual property. China does have the legislation protecting individual property, but the enforcement can be arbitrary.
Well, listen, we're reaching that point in this program where I have to ask a question that we're now in this autumn of elections asking all our viewers. Zoe, improving Sino-American relations is at the heart of what Polaris-Live tries to do, as you know. If you had a few private moments with President Xi Jinping as we turn into a new administration, what are a couple of recommendations you'd make to him to improve U.S.-China relations?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think many of us are heavily invested in and devoted to maintain a good relationship with these two great powers. And if I were to advise President Xi Jinping, I guess first of all, policy certainty and policy stability is very important. And I would also hope that he could improve decision-making transparency inside the Chinese policy-making system, because the lack of transparency lead to feed rumor mongering, and the rumors sometimes do not necessarily help in maintaining a healthy relationship. And then lastly, I would also hope that President Xi Jinping and perhaps the next U.S. president as well, they would both step up and make a commitment to people in the two countries, promising that we do not want to stoke up nationalism unnecessarily, because the use of nationalism, not just because the use of nationalism can be a double-edged sword, but also because nationalism, especially when economic growth is slowing down, nationalism become this channel that makes people to express extreme views against each other, and that is ultimately not helpful at people-to-people level.
Well, I hope that Mr. Xi has dialed in and is listening to Polaris-Live. Those are really, really welcome words. Zoe, we've run out of time. I want to thank you very much for that timely and instructive conversation. I hope you'll come back and see us again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarwar, for having me. It's really a great honor and privilege.
And thank you to all our viewers, especially those who asked questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. Please join us again on Polaris-Live.com as we continue to explore the impact of the U.S. presidential election on the most consequential relationship in the world, that between the United States and China, and its impact on the world. Until then, goodbye.